You've watched a less qualified man get further than you, a less honest man get trusted more than you, a less loyal man get rewarded more than you. And somewhere inside, you already know the system isn't broken. It's just running on rules nobody handed you. That realization lands differently for every man. Some get angry, some get bitter. Some spend years working harder, doing more, being better, and still watching the same pattern repeat itself around them. But a small number of men get curious. They stop asking why it's unfair. They start asking how it actually works. That question, asked honestly, without flinching, is where dark intelligence begins. Not cruelty, not manipulation, just the clear-eyed ability to see the game that's already being played around you, in your office, in your circle, in every room you've ever walked into. Niccolo Machiavelli mapped it. 9 laws, all of them true. Don't skip a single part of this video. Let's begin. Law number 1. Every person is a performer. Give a man a mask, and he will show you his true face. Oscar Wilde. Every person you've ever met has been performing. Not consciously, not maliciously, but performing nonetheless, presenting the version of themselves that serves their current situation best. Dark intelligence begins the moment you stop taking that performance at face value. Human beings are wired for social survival. That survival has always required managing perception, controlling what others see, feel, and believe about you. It isn't deception in the sinister sense, it's adaptation. But adaptation, worn long enough, becomes indistinguishable from the real thing, until pressure arrives and the gap between the two suddenly becomes visible. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous mistake a strategist could make was focusing on the visible event rather than the invisible motivation driving it. The event is just the surface. Beneath it, the fear, the ambition, the quiet resentment, that's where the real information lives. In a workplace, this plays out constantly. A colleague publicly supports a new direction while their body language, the slightly tightened jaw, the almost imperceptible pause before agreeing, tells an entirely different story. Most people hear the agreement. Dark intelligence reads the pause. During his years as a Florentine diplomat negotiating with Cesare Borgia, Niccolo Machiavelli been focused on Borgia's words. He watched his patterns, the specific ways behavior consistently contradicted stated intention. That reading protected Florence from catastrophic miscalculation. The surface is what people want you to see. Beneath it, if you're watching carefully enough, is everything you actually need to know. Law number 2. Silence knows more than speech. Queen Elizabeth I of England was renowned for exactly this quality. She listened in rooms where her advisors competed loudly for position and moved only when she already knew the outcome. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that the most politically exposed people in any court were almost always the most talkative ones. They filled silences with strategies, shared frustrations that became weapons in other people's hands, revealed alliances before those alliances were ready to be revealed. Most people talk to connect. A smaller, sharper group of people listen to collect. That distinction between talking and listening, between performing and observing, is one of the earliest separations between ordinary intelligence and the dark kind. Every time a person speaks without necessity, they hand you something. A priority, a fear, an insecurity dressed as confidence, a desire they didn't mean to reveal but couldn't quite contain. Words, especially unrehearsed ones, are confessions. And the person who talks least in any room is the one accumulating the most accurate picture of what's actually happening inside it. In a modern meeting, this plays out regularly. The person who speaks first, longest, and most passionately, often without being asked, is almost always the person with the most to lose from the outcome. That urgency is the tell. The person sitting quietly at the far end of the table, asking one precise question after everyone else has finished, that person already knows more than they're showing. Silence is the sleep that nourishes wisdom. Francis Bacon. Silence isn't absence. In the right hands, it's the sharpest tool in the room. Law number 3. Fear lasts longer than love. Love is conditional. It shifts with mood, circumstance, and time. Fear, the right kind, applied correctly, is considerably more durable. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. This is the law most people flinch from, because it sounds cold, because it sounds like something a villain would say. But Niccolo Machiavelli didn't write it as a celebration, he wrote it as an observation. And observations don't become less true simply because we prefer they weren't. People do what protects them, what avoids consequence, what keeps the most painful outcomes at bay. Love requires constant maintenance and favorable conditions to survive. Consequence, by contrast, requires only the credibility of its existence to function. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that the most effective rulers weren't the ones who demanded loyalty. They were the ones who structured situations so that loyalty and self-interest pointed in exactly the same direction. Compliance, built on aligned interest, maintains itself. Compliance maintained by affection requires constant renewal. In a workplace, a manager who has demonstrated that certain behaviors carry real consequences maintains order with less effort than one who relies entirely on being liked. People around the first self-regulate. People around the second test limits constantly. Fear, used without cruelty as the natural weight of consistent standards, isn't darkness, it's gravity. Law number 4. Perception wins every time. Reality doesn't determine outcomes. Perception of reality does. That single shift, from thinking the world responds to what's true to understanding it responds to what's believed, is one of the most disorienting realizations dark intelligence can hand a person. Human beings don't experience the world directly. They experience their interpretation of it, filtered through assumption, prior experience, and stories they were already telling before you walked into the room. The most important battlefield in any human interaction isn't what actually happened. It's what people believe happened, and those two things are almost never identical. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that a ruler's actual virtue mattered far less than whether his subjects perceived him as virtuous. The appearance, maintained consistently enough, becomes indistinguishable from the substance. In a world where most people never look past surfaces, appearance may be the only thing that ever gets evaluated. In a modern office, two people can deliver identical information with the same facts, but the one who speaks with more composure, more certainty, and visible control walks out having won something the other person never touched. What people believe about you is the only reality that ever actually affects your life. Shape it deliberately, or let others shape it for you. Law number 5. Timing is the invisible weapon. There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. William Shakespeare. The right move at the wrong moment isn't just ineffective. It's worse than doing nothing at all. Most people focus obsessively on what to do. Dark intelligence focuses equally, sometimes more, on when. People are not consistent, rational processes. They're emotional, contextual, and sensitive to timing in ways they rarely acknowledge consciously. The same request, made on a different day, in a different sequence, after a different series of events, lands completely differently. Not because the request changed, because the emotional climate surrounding it did. Niccolo Machiavelli called this the recognition of occasion, the ability to identify the precise moment when action would land with maximum effect and minimum resistance. He observed that great men didn't just make better decisions. They made their decisions at better moments, and timing, more than the quality of the decision itself, often determined everything. In a workplace negotiation, this appears constantly. The person who raises a concern immediately after a failure, when everyone is raw and defensive, loses ground that wouldn't have been lost if the same concern had been raised 3 days later, when the emotion had settled and people could actually hear it. Law number 6. Self-interest moves everything. Nobody does anything purely for you. They do it because doing it for you serves something they need for themselves. That isn't cynicism. It's the most useful thing you can understand about human motivation and the foundation of every lasting alliance, every negotiation that holds, and every relationship that survives real pressure. Men are not against you. They are merely for themselves. Gene Fowler. People are wired for survival first, connection second. Beneath every act of generosity, every display of loyalty, there is always a self-interest operating. Sometimes conscious, sometimes buried so deep the person themselves couldn't locate it, but present, always. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that the most effective rulers weren't the ones who demanded loyalty, they were the ones who structured situations so that loyalty and self-interest pointed in exactly the same direction. Compliance built on aligned interest maintains itself. Compliance built on obligation eventually breaks. In a workplace, this appears in something as simple as framing. The same request, presented as a personal favor, fails. Presented as something that directly serves the other person, succeeds. Not because the request changed, because the self-interest got acknowledged. Benjamin Franklin mastered this law with quiet precision. He never asked people to like him. He asked them for small favors, understanding that doing something for someone creates genuine investment in their success, not the other way around. Find what they want, connect it to what you need. Everything else handles itself. Law number 7. Weakness is an invitation. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. Sun Tzu. The world doesn't attack strength. It attacks whatever looks like it might not hold. This is one of the most consistent patterns in human behavior, and one of the least comfortable to sit with. Vulnerability, displayed in the wrong context, to the wrong people, doesn't generate compassion. It generates targeting. Not always through malicious intent, but the response happens in the subtle shift of tone, the slight increase in pressure, the testing that begins the moment someone senses that a boundary might move if pushed in the right direction. Niccolo Machiavelli observed that the leaders who faced the most sustained challenges were almost never the strongest ones. They were the ones who had, at some visible moment, appeared uncertain. That appearance, once registered, became an invitation that proved almost impossible to withdraw. In a workplace, this shows up in something as subtle as hesitation during a presentation. One moment of visible uncertainty, one pause that reads as doubt rather than thought, and the room shifts. Questions become sharper, challenges arise that wouldn't have appeared if the delivery had stayed steady. Hold your ground. Not aggressively, just completely. Law number 8. Information is the real currency. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Benjamin Franklin. Money gets spent. Influence fades. Information, held quietly, deployed precisely, compounds. The person who understands what others don't yet know, what others haven't yet connected, what others are actively trying to keep hidden, holds a form of leverage that no amount of money or position can fully neutralize. The hidden psychology here operates on a level most people never consciously examine. Knowledge isn't power in the abstract motivational sense. It's power in the precise, mechanical sense. The specific ability to predict behavior, anticipate moves, and position yourself ahead of events that everyone else is still waiting to react to. The person who holds more accurate information doesn't need to force outcomes. They simply wait for situations to unfold exactly as they already knew they would. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous advisors in any court weren't the ones with the loudest opinions. They were the ones who said little, observed everything, and moved only when their information gave them an advantage nobody else could see yet. No more, say less, move when it matters. Law number 9. The man who controls himself controls everything else. Every other law on this list becomes inaccessible without this one. Dark intelligence isn't just about reading other people. It's about having enough command over yourself, your reactions, your impulses, your emotional responses, that you never become the most readable person in any room you enter. He who controls others may be powerful, but he who has mastered himself is mightier still. Lao Tzu. Self-mastery isn't a technique applied from the outside. It's the product of a long, uncomfortable, ongoing negotiation between the part of you that reacts and the part that chooses. Most people never win that negotiation. Their emotions surface on their face before their mind finishes processing. Their frustration leaks into their tone, their anxiety reshapes their posture. And every person with enough observational intelligence reads all of it before a single deliberate word has been spoken. Niccolò Machiavelli observed that the rulers who lasted longest weren't always the most talented. They were the ones whose internal discipline made them the most difficult to destabilize. You cannot manipulate a man who doesn't react. You cannot predict a man who governs his own responses. You cannot outmaneuver a man who never shows you where he's going next. In everyday life, this appears in something as simple as a difficult conversation. The person who stays regulated, whose voice doesn't tighten, whose pace doesn't shift, holds the entire temperature of that exchange in their hands. Marcus Aurelius governed one of history's most demanding empires while managing personal grief, political betrayal, and military crisis simultaneously, without ever visibly breaking. Everything starts here, and everything, without this, eventually falls apart. 9 laws, and somewhere in the middle of reading them, something shifted. You felt it, that quiet, slightly uncomfortable recognition that you've been in these situations before, on the wrong side of them. That feeling isn't weakness. It's the beginning of something different. Dark intelligence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive dramatically. It settles in slowly, through observation, through patience, through the daily decision to see people and situations as they actually are, rather than as you need them to be. The 9 laws aren't a finish line. They're a starting point, a new lens. And once you start seeing through it, every room, every conversation, every interaction begins revealing information it was always carrying, but that you simply weren't equipped to read yet. Now you are. Drop a comment. Which law already exists somewhere in your life without you ever naming it? Write it. 1 line. Like this video. Share it. Subscribe, because the next level goes deeper than this one ever did.